Hello folks and welcome to the latest edition of Skybound on the Ground with Michael Lombart. I'm pleased to be Michael Lombart and to introduce you to the latest topic that we're discussing in our aviation discussion here. We are on to Chapter 9 of the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, Weight and Balance. So how do these two things, weight and balance, affect our flying? Well, first of all, I need to inform you a very important fact, and that is the airplane that you're going to be flying is not like the family car. And I remember being a little bit surprised by this concept, but if you think about it, it actually makes quite a bit of sense. Weight. So let's talk about weight. How much weight can you put in a little airplane? Well, think about it. When you load up the family car with all the camping gear and kids and everybody, and you can just roll down the road, and there's not so much concern about overloading the car unless you bottom out the springs or something. But in an airplane, you're not rolling down the road, you're actually trying to take off and go into the sky. And so that means those wings have to produce enough lift to support the weight that is being held inside your airplane. And I just got another email on my iPad here, and so people are distracting me while I'm trying to teach. Okay, so how much weight can you put in the airplane? Well, what happens if you overload it? Well, there's a very obvious thing that I'm sure you're thinking about. The plane goes down the runway, and it does not take off. That is not a desirable situation, especially if there are obstacles at the end and you didn't figure out that you weren't going to take off and you just kept going full power trying to make that airplane fly. Well, don't ever overload your plane to that point. But most of us aren't going to do that. There's actually a more subtle temptation. And you see, aircraft manufacturers have tested their airplanes and they've designed them and they've figured out exactly what the maximum weight that this airplane is allowed to take, and they give you that number. It's called maximum gross weight of the airplane. So we need to make sure that we always have our airplane loaded within this max gross weight figure. And for the Cessna 172 that I'm kind of going to use as the example for this lesson, that's 2,300 pounds. So not a whole lot, especially when you consider that the airplane itself weighs 1,400 pounds out of that total 2,300. So that leaves you just under 900 pounds of stuff that you can put in there. Okay, so what happens if you had a lot of stuff today, and so we loaded the airplane 100 pounds over gross. What's going to happen to the airplane? Will it fly? Yes, it will. And this is where we get into some tricky stuff. It's kind of like entering the twilight zone of flying, because you really don't want to start messing around with this. When you overload an airplane, even if it flies, you're going to notice some penalties, which will get worse and worse, obviously, as you load the plane more. Some of those penalties are, as you're taking off, it's going to take a lot longer for you to do your takeoff roll before you get off the ground. It's going to take, the airplane is not going to climb as well. It's going to take longer for you to get to cruise altitude. Your cruise altitude itself won't be as high as you could make it. That might give you problems if you're trying to go over some mountains or obstacles in the way. And your cruise speed is going to be lower. When you finally get to your destination and you set down, you're going to use up more runway as you're trying to stop the airplane. Of course, that's going to put wear and tear on your brakes. So you can see there are penalties that are associated with overloading your airplane. So just don't do that. So how do we make sure that we keep our airplane loaded correctly? Well, just make sure that it is under max gross weight. Now, balance is very much tied up with this concept as well. And this is not something we have to worry about much with the family car either, how we place things in there, unless you happen to put all the weight on one side and then you're driving down the road with kind of the car leaning to the side or something. But with an airplane, well, you have to think about its stability and where you put the stuff, because we want to make sure our airplane is still controllable. Here's kind of a extreme example, and I'll just show you on the little airplane over here. If you load the airplane and put all the weight and make the center of gravity where all that weight is concentrated, if you put that to the front of the airplane, you're going to have, that's called the forward CG. You put the CG all the way forward. You're going to have problems with trying to get the nose up, especially if you come in for landing and you are at idle power, you bring the power back and you try to flare the airplane. Let me put the gear down just to illustrate this. And hey, I should make a runway as well. Okay, so we loaded our airplane up and we managed to get it off the ground because we had full power and everything. But now we're coming down and we have the airplane at idle and we want to flare to get the airplane nose up and land on the main gears. And we pull back, and because it's so heavy in the front, we realize that we've pulled all the way back and we've run out of elevator. And so we can't flare the airplane, and we just go nose first into the ground. We don't want that. So don't load your airplane forward of the forward center of gravity limits. You're going to have a range on the airplane where the manufacturers have figured out that, okay, the center of gravity can be located within this range over here, and the airplane will be flyable and it will be controllable and stable. And we're talking right now about longitudinal stability, and that is, you know, forward and backward, how the airplane is stable on its longitudinal axis. What happens if you load the airplane too far aft of the aft CG limits? Well, you're going to have problems as well. And now the airplane, if it gets into a stalled condition, because, well, first of all, it's going to be flying a little bit tail low because you are tail heavy, and if you manage to get the airplane into a stalled condition, maybe you're out practicing or maybe you did it inadvertently, you're going to have trouble actually recovering from that. You might not recover from it because you can't get the nose down. All this weight is pulling the back of the airplane down. So that's a danger of it. There's also just the fact that the airplane is a lot more touchy and sensitive to control inputs while you are flying. And so if you're flying along and you happen to bump the controls or just try to do some type of control movement, it's very easy for the pilot to over-control and make the airplane do some strong maneuver that will overstress the airframe. And that's when you have the airplane loaded after the CG limits. So we don't want to do that. Don't load it forward of the CG limits or after the, don't load it, too far forward of the CG range. Don't load it after the CG range. Just keep it right in there. So how do we do our weight and balance? Well, the weight is probably the simpler part. Just involves doing some simple adding up. You just take the weight of the stuff that you're putting in the airplane, passengers, bags, dogs, whatever you're trying to put in there, tomato plants, and then you just add it up and see if it comes within that 2,300 pounds for this airplane or whatever your airplane happens to be. Now here's a consideration. Do you know that fuel, that's something that you put in your airplane, and that also has weight. That was kind of a novel thing when I first realized that. Fuel actually weighs 6 pounds a gallon. And so you got to take that into consideration when you're adding up your weight for the airplane. If you have full tanks on the Cessna 172, that's 40 gallons, so that's going to be 240 pounds of weight that you have that is going towards that 2,300 pound total. So that means that if you had about just under 900 pounds of weight that you could take with the airplane empty, if you put full fuel, that means you have even less, something down less than 700 pounds of actual weight of payload that you can take, people, cargo, whatnot. So this is something important for you to realize, and the manufacturer in the Pilot's Operating Handbook will give you loading graphs. And so so we know how to add up our weight. That's pretty simple. You just put things together. You might have to ask your passengers how much they weigh, and just assure them that this is for safety's sake and not for prying curiosity. Alright, how do we balance things? How do we keep things in balance? This takes a few more steps. This is a little bit more of a complex thing, but it's actually pretty simple at the same time. So we got to learn how to do some balance equations, and this is fun. Let's say you want to play teeter-totter with somebody, playing the seesaw, and you're not just doing the up and down thing. What you're doing actually is, because you guys are geeks, you want to balance it perfectly. And the person that you're playing with is going to sit on the teeter-totter at a distance of 5 feet. 5 feet away from the center point our reference point right here, which in this case where it's bouncing on, we call it the fulcrum. And so we're going to put our person there, and this guy weighs 180 pounds. Okay, so here's the problem. You weigh only 150 pounds. How are we going to balance things so that, well, if you put yourself at exactly 5 feet on the other side, what is that going to do? Well, he's going to be on the ground, you're going to be up in the air, and you're not balancing the teeter-totter. So, what do you have to do? You got to put yourself out further, right? And how much further? Well, this is where we get to do some really cool, this is where the equations get, the math comes in, and it's actually really cool. If you take the distance, and we call that arm, and distance from the reference point, and just think, well, how long is my arm, and that's how far away we are from the reference point, something like that. Okay, if you take the arm and you multiply it by the weight, you're going to get a number. So 180 times 5 is 900, and we call this, when you multiply that together, we call this moment. And moment is the total tendency, total turning tendency that you are producing at that point on the teeter-totter there. And so we have 900, and we just use the two units together, so we have 900 foot-pounds. And that is our moment. And so all we have to do now is, well, we know to figure out where we need to put you on the teeter-totter. We know how much you weigh, 150 pounds, and this is just a generic example because I really don't know how much you weigh. We know you weigh 150 pounds, and so all we have to do is divide the moment by your weight and figure out exactly how, and that will tell you exactly how far what the arm has to be in order to produce an exact equal moment that is going to balance things out. So what do? We just use our calculator here. So 900 divided by 150, and that gives us 6 feet. So all we have to do is sit you down at 6 feet right here, and that produces a 6 times 150 pounds. That was a 900-pound moment. A 900 foot-pound moment, and we have balanced things out. So that's the basic principles of weight and balance. And now let's apply it to an airplane. Now, first of all, just there are a couple differences, and the first one is that we aren't using it like a teeter-totter. What we're trying to do for the airplane is trying to figure out where the center of gravity on the airplane is. So we're kind of working at it from a different direction. When you're looking at the airplane, we're just going to use a different reference point now then. So what the manufacturer does is they choose some reference point out in front, and it's just an arbitrary point, and so it really doesn't matter where it is, but then they measure the location of everything in the airplane in relation to that reference point. We call this the datum reference. And don't ask me where they get their names, but that's the datum reference. And so everything that's inside the airplane, wherever you can put stuff, we measure the distance away from that datum reference, and that is the arm for each station that you can put things in. So you got the you can have the front seats where the pilots sit, and the back seats, and the baggage and stuff. And so each is going to have its own arm. And for this airplane, this is going to be 37 inches. It's usually measured in inches. So 37 inches for the front seats, and then 73 inches for the rear seats. And then for the baggage compartment, well, you've got 2 spots where you can put baggage. You can put it a little bit further forward, and that'll be at 95 inches, and then 123 inches, I think that is. Okay, so wherever you put stuff in the airplane, then you just calculate, okay, I'm putting 100 pounds in the front seat. 100 pounds times 37 inches, that gives us 3,700 inch-pounds. And because we get such large numbers, we just chop off the last 3 digits and we put a decimal there instead. And so you would get a moment of 3.7 inch-pounds. So that's how we calculate things up. And what we have to do to figure out where the center of gravity in the airplane is to add up all the weight that we have in the airplane. So why don't we do a problem? But, well, let me tell you how we do it first. So we have to add up all the weight in the airplane, and then we also have to add up all the moments that we calculated. And then we just divide the moments by the weight, and that will tell us the precise position where that center of gravity is located on the airplane in inches. So why don't we do a little practice problem here? And I brought some weights for us to use. Okay, so we're just gonna have a little chart up here that I'm gonna make. So item and the weight, arm, and moment. Okay, so the airplane itself has a weight, so empty weight is 1,454 pounds. Okay, and just so you know where the center of gravity of the airplane is when it's empty, it's actually at 39.6 inches. And if you times these together, you would get a total moment of 57.6. That's times 1,000. We're just using more manageable numbers there. Okay, so we're going to load this thing up. We're going to put full fuel. So that would be 240 pounds. And what the airplane manufacturer will give you is a loading graph that you can use for the airplane. And so I got all this from that Pilot's Operating Handbook, and actually let me go get it real quick. So they will give you some type of means of figuring out how, when you load the airplane, how much, what station everything is at, what distance it is from the reference point, and then they'll also oftentimes give you some type of a graph, a chart where you can just see, oh, okay, if we have this much weight of pilots, that's going to give us this much moment. And so that just helps things out. And what we're going to do right here is we're just adding up the information. So we have the fuel there, and the arm of the fuel is 47.9 inches. If we times that together, we get 11.5 moment. That's our moment for fuel. And the front seats. Okay, so we're going to have two standard weight people, 170 pounds each. That's 340 pounds. Front seats are 37 inches behind that reference point, so that's our arm there. It gives us a total moment of 11.8 when you times that together. Back seats. Let's hope we don't have any backseat pilots. We're going to put, we're putting 320, sorry, we're putting people who are 320 pounds each. Okay, so that's 73 inches, and when you times that together, our total moment is 23.4. If I can write the right things down here. Okay, so now we have baggage compartment. So we have two spots in the baggage compartment where you can put stuff, and we're going to put stuff. You can't put more than 120 pounds in both in the total baggage area. So we're going to put, let's say we put 50 pounds in the first spot there, and 95, so that's 95 inches after the datum reference. So we add times that together, and we get 4.8 as our moment. Okay, so all we have to do now is, well, let's add up our weight together. Let's just use our handy-dandy cell phone calculator right here. And, I already did the math for you. This comes up to 2384. And what is our maximum gross weight for our airplane? 2,300 pounds for this Cessna 172. So we are 84 pounds overweight. And guess what? We only have 4 people in the airplane, and we have fuel. So it is very possible to overload your airplane. It's actually very easy to do it. And so you need to make sure that you don't do that before you go flying. So always do your weight and balance calculations. Okay, but we want to figure out where the center of gravity is located on this airplane to see, well, okay, I know the airplane is a little bit overloaded. We can fix that by taking some baggage out and maybe going with a little bit less fuel. So that's something that's fixable. But is the way that we've loaded it, is it within limits? Is it balanced? So how do we figure that out? Well, we have to add up the total moments. And so when you add up the total moments, you get a moment of 109 inch-pounds. And we look inside our pilot's operating handbook, and they will have given us a range where you can have the center of gravity within. And so we know what the total moment is, and how do we figure out where the center of gravity is? You divide total moment by your weight, and that will tell you the distance from the datum reference that your center of gravity is. So let's calculate this out. 109, well, that's really 109,000 divided by 2384, and that gives us 45.7. 45.7 inches. That is the precise position of where our center of gravity is located on our airplane. So that's pretty cool. And it will take a little bit of practice for you to get this equation down, but if you just remember, weight times arm equals moment, then you can get things kind of figured out. The pilot's operating handbook will give you a chart that you can reference now to see if you are within limits. And so here is our center of gravity chart. And what did we get? We got 45.7 inches, and we are at 20, well, let's say we bumped it down to 2,300 pounds. Well, no, here's just an illustration. We are overweight, but, okay, 45 inches, we are within limits of the center of gravity range there. So you can go from 35 inches all the way to 47 inches. That's the safe range. Okay, so what the manufacturers oftentimes do is they'll give you a chart where you don't have to calculate the CG itself, you just have to figure out the total moments, and then they give you a center of gravity and an envelope on here that you can just reference by moment, and that way you don't have to do the extra step of division. Okay, so that is when we have the airplane is loaded a little bit too much, and it is still within bounds, but it is overloaded. Can you have the opposite case, where the airplane is within weight limits, but it is unbalanced? You betcha. Let's take a look at our next example. So, well, the airplane's empty weight hasn't changed, so I really didn't have to erase that. So let me just write those numbers in again. Okay, so we're going to go with full fuel. And 47.9 inches is our location of the fuel. So that gives us 11.5. Okay, so we're going to put, how much weight do we want to put in the front seat? Let's put just the pilot, 170 pounds. Okay, so the other seat's going to be empty. Just have a pilot up there. You have to have at least one person if you're going to fly the airplane. Alright, so the distance, location of the pilot's station is 37 inches, so you times that together, you get 6.3 as our moment. Back seat, we're going to put a bit more weight in the back seat. We got stuff that we want to put there. You're hauling around your friend's stuff, maybe his dirty laundry and books and who knows what, and he needs to get it back to his home, so you're taking it for him. And so in the back seat we have 280 pounds, and times that by 73 inches, and you get a moment of 20.4. And then in the baggage compartment, we've got stuff there too, 70 pounds worth of junk. Sorry, it's not junk, whatever your friend has in there. That's 95 inches is its position, and so times that together, you get a total moment of 6.7. And then we're going to max this out. We're going to put 50 pounds in that further back spot, which is at 123 inches, and times that together, you get 6.2. Okay, so let us figure this out here. How much does the airplane weigh total? Everything weighs 2,264 pounds. So what is our maximum gross weight for the airplane? 2,300 pounds. So we are underweight, or we are within limits, that is. We have actually pretty close to maximum gross weight, but we have some leeway. Okay, but what about the center of gravity location of the airplane? We need to add up our moments so that we can divide the total moments by the total weight so that we can figure out where the center of gravity location is. So let us do that there. 57, 11.5, 6.3, blah, 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 blah. And, oh, I did the math already. 108. Let's see if you can see that.
Apologize for my handwriting. It gets worse the lower down the board I get. So 108.6 is our CG location, is our total moment, and if you divide that by your weight, that gives you your CG location, which is at 48 inches. Alright, let's take a look at our chart here, and what is the maximum what is the maximum aft CG limit that you can go after that datum reference? You can only go 47 inches back. And guess what? Our center of gravity is at 48 inches, and so the airplane is going to be tail heavy to an excess. How do we fix that? That is where we get to do a little bit more math, and this is the fun part. So first of all, we want to figure out, we want to put this within limits, and we want to put the center of gravity to a, where do we want to put it? We want to put it to 47 inches. Because that will be right. Okay, I was a little bit wrong. It's actually like 47.3 inches that you're allowed to have. So if we put it within 47 inches, we'll be right within limits there. So we don't have to take weight out of the airplane. We just need to shift things around. So how do we do that? How much weight? Let's say we want to take weight from the back seat and put it into the front seat. How much weight would we have to do that to get the CG location to move forward to 47 inches? This is where we do a little bit of clever figuring. And remember, when you're doing this, you're not changing the total weight of the airplane. So the total weight of the airplane stays the same, but we are changing the center of gravity by shifting things around. So let's just take a look at things here. Our airplane, our gross weight, sorry, let me just write airplane here. Total weight is 2264, and our center of gravity was 48 inches, and the total moment was 108.6. What we want to do is shift weight around so that we can get a center of gravity of 48 inches. So this is before, and this is after. So the airplane will still weigh the same. What is the total moment going to be when you have the center of gravity at 47 inches? It is going to be times these together, and you get, if I can look it up here, okay, then you get 106.4. Alright, so all we have to do now is see what the difference is. The difference between these two is actually 2.2, and that's the total moment change that we need to somehow accomplish by moving stuff from the back seat to the front seat. And so all we have to do now is figure out, well, what is the distance that we're moving stuff forward, and then we can just calculate how much weight needs to move that distance to produce a moment change of 2.2. So let's see here. The back seats are at 73 inches in the airplane, and the front seats are at 37 inches. So the difference between the two right there is a difference of 36 inches. So let me just, so we're moving stuff forward 36 inches. And we know that we want to produce a 2.2 moment change, and so all we have to do now is calculate and just do some division here, and that is 2.2 divided by 3.6, or actually 2200, because remember this is in thousands and we're just shortening it to make more manageable numbers, and you get a total of, let's do the math here. You have your calculator out. I just want to make sure it all works out because, alright, let's see here. 2200 divided by 36. Woohoo! 61 pounds! All we have to do is move 61 pounds of luggage forward, and that should solve our problem. So let's try it out. Let's see if it worked. Okay, so we're just going to put everything back up here again, and I'll write it all out again. And so empty weight 1454, and that is 39.6.
I should just turn you off and then turn it back on when I've written it up. We are back. So I've got this all up on the board now, and we have, while some things are unchanged, the empty weight is unchanged, fuel's unchanged, we haven't done anything with that. We kept stuff in the back seat, in the baggage compartments, that's all the same, so their weight and total moment hasn't changed, but we shifted stuff from the back seat to the front seat. We put 61 pounds in the front now that we shifted, and so that means we took 61 pounds out of the back. And here's our new stuff here. So if you times 231 times 37 inches, you're going to get a moment of 16, you're going to get a moment of 8.5 inch pounds there. And then over here, if you times 219 times 273 inches, you get a total moment of 16 inch pounds. Alright, so now let's add this all up and see what we get. Oh, we get 106.5, and our total weight remained unchanged. And so you divide the total moment by your total weight, and let's see what the center of gravity is. Guess what, folks? We managed to move our center of gravity to within limits, 47 inches. So this is really fun stuff, doing weight and balance calculations. Nice thing about the Pilot's Operating Handbook is that they give you some really nice charts that you can work with, and so you just learn how to use the chart that you have in the airplane. Once again, this is a loading graph which shows you, okay, if you have this much in the back seat, it's going to produce this much moment, and so you add up the total moments and plot that on the graph here and see if you're within limits, and you can play around with things without having to actually do any math. All you have to do is add up the total weights and the total moments. So that's some nice stuff. The Pilot's Operating Handbook, if it's more primitive or just different, it might just give you some values. It could just tell you, okay, this is where the locations of the different stations in the airplane are, and these in numbers are the center of gravity limits, and so don't exceed that, and so you just have to do the math then and figure out, am I within limits or not. So that, folks, is how we do center of gravity calculations, and just make sure you don't overload your airplane and don't load your airplane in a bad fashion so that it is unbalanced. Balance in all things. It's important to be balanced in life, and especially with aviation when you're flying airplanes. Now, we're going to learn next lesson about how, well, even if you are legal and loaded up below maximum gross weight, how your airplane may not even want to take off even in that situation. And how is that the case? Well, you have to tune in next time for the next session of Skybound on the Ground.